Dead to the world. Dead to the world. I remember, hey, I'm alive.
For over 4 decades, the world has debated how Elvis Presley really died. A sudden heart attack, a fatal drug overdose, or something far more complex. Now, at 90 years old, the man who knew Elvis's mind better than anyone, his secret therapist, has finally spoken. Dr. Malcolm Rivers stayed silent out of loyalty. Until now. In his final interview, he reveals what he witnessed behind the walls of Graceland. The cries for help. The broken spirit. The man who gave the world everything and lost himself in the process. What he shares will shake even the most devoted Elvis fans. Because, according to Dr. Rivers, Elvis didn't just die in that bathroom. He was dying for years, and what happens next will change everything we thought we knew about the king. It was 1965 when Dr. Malcolm Rivers received an unmarked envelope with a single sentence inside. A client will be arriving Tuesday at 11 a.m. Discretion is everything. That Tuesday, Elvis Presley walked into his Beverly Hills office wearing a dark suit, sunglasses, and a look of sheer exhaustion. Not the explosive icon the world knew, but a man clinging to something invisible. Dr. Rivers had heard the rumors about Elvis's erratic behavior, the prescription pills, the outbursts, but nothing could prepare him for the truth that walked through the door. Elvis slumped into the chair and said quietly, "I don't even know who I am anymore." That first session lasted nearly 3 hours. Elvis talked about everything: his fear of failure, the pressure of being the king, the guilt over not doing enough for his mother before she died, and the deep emptiness he felt even on stage. Rivers described him as a man burdened by greatness. Despite the lavish lifestyle, Elvis felt trapped, controlled by Colonel Tom Parker, smothered by fans and haunted by the death of his twin brother Jesse, who had died at birth. "I feel like I'm living both our lives," Elvis told him, and that pressure, he admitted, was crushing. From that day on, their sessions continued in secret, sometimes at the office, sometimes over the phone, and later, even at Graceland. But from the very beginning, Rivers saw what no one else did. Elvis wasn't addicted to fame or drugs. He was addicted to escaping himself. He feared being forgotten more than anything, yet he longed for a life no one would recognize. "I just want to sit on a porch somewhere and breathe," Elvis once whispered. But that dream, even then, felt impossible. He'd been a symbol for so long, he'd forgotten how to be a man. Rivers noted that Elvis used humor and charm as shields, tools to avoid vulnerability. But in private, the mask slipped often. He cried when talking about his mother. He lashed out when talking about his career. He confessed to feeling more like a product than a person. And through it all, he kept taking more pills. Not because he wanted to get high, but because he didn't know how else to sleep. By the third session, Rivers tried recommending a break, a real one. No shows, no press, just rest. But Elvis shook his head. "If I stop, they'll forget me. And if they forget me, I'm dead already." That sentence, Rivers would later say, haunted him for years, because even in that first week, he realized Elvis wasn't just heading toward a breakdown, he was already in one. Fame didn't just elevate Elvis Presley. It dismantled him piece by piece. Dr. Malcolm Rivers recalled how, over time, Elvis began describing his success not as a dream come true, but as a prison he could never escape from. "They all think I've got it made," Elvis told him once, "but I feel like a puppet with gold strings." Every part of his life had become performance. He couldn't eat in peace, couldn't sleep without security, couldn't even go to church without the flash of cameras. By the early 1970s, those therapy sessions had shifted from attempts at healing to desperate confessions. Elvis spoke of feeling bought and sold by the Colonel, of performing for crowds that screamed his name but never saw his pain. He wasn't allowed to cancel shows. He wasn't allowed to change direction. And when he did speak up, he was gaslit. "Just take something, Elvis. You'll be fine," they'd say. But he wasn't fine. The fame that once thrilled him now consumed him. He began referring to himself in the third person, saying things like, "The king has to do what the king's expected to do." Dr. Rivers said it was a coping mechanism, a way of separating the icon from the man who just wanted to be left alone. At home, Elvis would obsess over newspaper headlines, scanning for any sign that the world had moved on. He feared becoming a joke, a washed-up act performing old hits in glitter suits. Ironically, that fear was exactly what he was becoming. During one session in 1972, Rivers asked him what scared him most. Elvis didn't hesitate. "Becoming irrelevant," he said. "That, and waking up in a world that doesn't need me anymore." Fame had taken away his privacy, his spontaneity, and slowly, his mind. And with every new demand came another pill, another late-night call, another confession whispered into the phone in a southern drawl that was starting to slur more often. The fans saw the sparkle, the jumpsuits, the charisma. But Dr. Rivers saw something else. He saw a man fading behind the makeup. A man too famous to cry, too watched to admit weakness, too loved to ever feel truly known. "It's like being on stage in front of thousands," Elvis told him, "and still feeling like you're singing to no one." And by then, Rivers feared, Elvis was no longer performing to entertain. He was performing to survive. By the mid-1970s, Elvis Presley's descent into dependency wasn't just physical, it was psychological, spiritual, and terrifying to watch unfold. Dr. Malcolm Rivers documented it all. The man who once walked into his office with nervous energy and a broken heart was now increasingly unpredictable, incoherent, and deeply paranoid. The pills had started small: sleeping aids, mild tranquilizers, occasional uppers to get through a long day. But over time, the cocktail became catastrophic. Elvis would rattle off the names of medications like a pharmacist: Placidil, Dilaudid, Demerol, Valium, Quaaludes. He needed one set to wake up, another to stay awake, a third to come down, and a final set to sleep. And sometimes, even that didn't work. Rivers tried to intervene. He proposed supervised detox, time away from the cameras, a full psychological evaluation. But there was always someone in the way: Colonel Tom Parker, the Memphis Mafia, even Elvis himself. "Can't risk the press finding out," Parker told Rivers during a tense phone call. "Elvis is fine. You're making this bigger than it is." But Rivers knew it wasn't paranoia. Elvis was unraveling. There were days he couldn't get out of bed, nights he couldn't stop pacing the halls of Graceland, muttering about unseen enemies, phantom threats. He believed people were tapping his phones. He thought the government was watching him. He even admitted once that he'd hidden microphones in the jungle room to catch his staff gossiping behind his back. Dr. Rivers feared the onset of drug-induced psychosis, maybe even undiagnosed bipolar disorder. The mood swings were violent. One day, Elvis would be full of energy, hosting impromptu jam sessions, quoting spiritual texts, and handing out Cadillacs like candy. The next, he'd disappear for 48 hours, locked in his room, blinds drawn, refusing to eat or speak to anyone. "I'm not me anymore," he told Rivers during one of their last in-person sessions. "I'm not even sure who's living in this body." But by that point, Elvis wasn't just avoiding help. He was surrounded by enablers. Doctors who'd write any prescription, friends too scared to confront him, staff who just wanted to keep the peace. And above it all, a manager who saw therapy as a liability, not a lifeline. Rivers later said that Elvis didn't overdose by mistake. He overdosed by habit. It had become his routine, his ritual, his only way to quiet the chaos. "They see the rhinestones," Elvis once whispered to him, "but they never see the rust." By 1976, Rivers believed it wasn't a matter of if Elvis would die young. It was a matter of when. Of all the wounds Elvis Presley carried into Dr. Rivers' office, none cut deeper than the loss of Priscilla. Their divorce in 1973 wasn't just a personal blow. It was, in Elvis's mind, the ultimate confirmation that he was broken beyond repair. "She was the last thing that made me feel real." Gifts replaced conversations. Lavish vacations replaced connection. "I gave her things, not time," he confessed. And once she left, he spiraled further. According to Dr. Rivers, Elvis often cried during sessions when talking about Lisa Marie. He felt like a failure as a father. "I see her for a weekend, and then disappear back into pills and paper walls," he said. Every missed birthday, every postponed visit, it haunted him. He believed Lisa would grow up thinking of him as a distant legend, not a loving dad. And that guilt festered in his already fragile psyche. He tried to love again, short relationships, flings, even a few he thought might turn into something more. But he sabotaged them all. Rivers noted that Elvis had a deep fear of abandonment, rooted in childhood trauma. Losing his mother Gladys had left a scar so deep, he spent his life trying to fill it. With women, with fame, with adoration. But none of it worked. "They all leave," he told Rivers. "Eventually, they all leave." One session in particular stood out. Elvis showed up wearing sunglasses, sat down without a word, and pulled out a ring box. Inside was the engagement ring he'd planned to give Priscilla before their marriage started falling apart. "I kept it," he said, "because I thought maybe one day I'd be the man she deserved." Dr. Rivers watched as this global icon, idolized by millions, broke down over the simplest human need, to be loved without condition. The pressure to be Elvis, to always be on, had eroded his ability to be vulnerable. "I don't know how to be a man when I'm not on a stage," he confessed. Love, to him, felt like a performance he was always flubbing. And as the years passed, that guilt metastasized. He believed he'd failed as a husband, failed as a father, and failed as a person. Rivers once asked him what he thought redemption looked like. Elvis stared out the window for a long time before replying, "Getting to hold Lisa's hand without cameras around. That'd be enough." But that moment never came. The spotlight never dimmed, and the guilt never left. To the public, Graceland was Elvis Presley's palace, a symbol of opulence, power, and Southern charm. But to Dr. Malcolm Rivers, it was something far more tragic. It was the cage where Elvis slowly lost himself. "He used to call it a fortress," Rivers said, "but after a while, it started to feel more like a tomb." Behind the ornate gates and velvet drapes, Graceland became a haven for routine, addiction, and isolation. Elvis rarely left the grounds in his final years. The man who once toured the world now confined himself to a handful of rooms, obsessively repeating the same habits, ordering the same meals, watching the same late-night movies, even sleeping at odd hours to avoid daylight. Rivers believed the house's physical comfort only masked the emotional starvation inside. He could have anything he wanted, except peace. Elvis had a private line to Dr. Rivers and would often call late into the night, sometimes whispering, sometimes rambling, sometimes just sitting in silence on the other end. "I don't like the quiet," he once said. "When it's quiet, I start thinking again." The jungle room, famously decorated in exotic wood and green shag carpet, became his sanctuary. But not for music or creativity, for escape. That room, Rivers said, was where Elvis would sit in the early hours, pill bottle in hand, television flickering, lost in memories of a life that felt more distant by the day. He would pace the hallways, check the locks, pull back the curtains to make sure no one was watching, even though no one ever was. "They used to scream my name," he told Rivers. "Now they just wait for me to die." The Memphis Mafia, his inner circle of aides and friends, rarely intervened. Most were on his payroll, and nearly all enabled his routines. No one said no. No one questioned the meds. No one suggested change. Dr. Rivers tried to confront this pattern, warning Elvis that he was dangerously isolated. But the response was always the same. "This is the only place I feel safe." In truth, it was the only place where Elvis could keep pretending he was still in control, still adored, still vital. But the walls were closing in. Rivers once described a call where Elvis admitted, "Graceland's supposed to be my home, but it feels like I'm haunting it." He walked those halls like a ghost, clutching his past like a lifeline. Trophies, gold records, costumes, they lined the rooms, yet meant less and less. "That house didn't save him," Rivers said. "It preserved him, like a museum exhibit no one dared move." By the final year of his life, Graceland wasn't a place of retreat. It was a stage with no audience, where the king wandered from room to room, waiting for the curtain to fall. To the outside world, the final weeks of Elvis Presley's life seemed surprisingly normal. He was rehearsing for an upcoming tour. He was seen driving around the Graceland grounds. There were photos, even smiles. But Dr. Malcolm Rivers says that beneath the surface, Elvis had already begun to let go. It was like watching a man pack a suitcase for a trip he knew he wouldn't return from, he recalled. Elvis's voice had changed, softer, slower, more detached. He spoke less about the future and more about legacy. In their final phone session, Rivers asked if he felt ready for the tour. Elvis was silent for several seconds. Then he said, "I think the show's the only thing still keeping me alive." That line struck Rivers like a warning bell. Elvis wasn't talking about excitement. He was talking about obligation, responsibility, a role he couldn't walk away from. They paid for the king, so the king's gotta show up. But Rivers could hear the weariness in every word. Elvis was barely sleeping. He was alternating between intense bursts of energy and long, ghost-like silences. His diet was worse than ever. He was gaining weight fast. "My body's breaking down, Doc," he said one night. "I feel like I'm rotting from the inside out." There were also moments of eerie clarity. One night, Elvis asked Rivers, "Do you think people will remember me for the music or the mess?" That question hung in the air. Rivers didn't know how to respond, because both were true. Elvis was preparing for something, but it wasn't a comeback. He had begun organizing personal belongings, giving away jewelry, and writing short notes, things Rivers later recognized as quiet goodbyes. Even his relationship with Ginger Alden, his final companion, felt more like comfort than connection. "She's sweet," Elvis told Rivers, but I don't think she really sees me. On August 15th, the night before his death, Elvis reportedly stayed up late reading, watching television, and speaking briefly with staff. But Rivers later said that even in those small behaviors, there were signs: withdrawal, finality, acceptance. When the news broke on the morning of August 16th, Rivers wasn't shocked. Heartbroken, yes, but not surprised. Because while the world was stunned that the king had died at just 42, Dr. Rivers had been watching him die for years, slowly, silently, beneath the weight of expectation, addiction, and loneliness. He didn't collapse suddenly, Rivers said. He surrendered quietly. The man who carried so much on his back just laid it down. The fans mourned. The headlines screamed. But the truth had been unfolding long before that bathroom door closed, and almost no one saw it coming. The world knew Elvis Presley as the king, the icon, the performer, the force that reshaped music history. But Dr. Malcolm Rivers says that title was more mask than crown. Beneath the glittering jumpsuits and gold records lived a man with secrets so guarded, even those closest to him never knew the full truth. He wasn't just battling addiction, Rivers explained. He was battling his own identity. In their deepest sessions, Elvis spoke of his obsession with purpose. He wasn't just chasing fame. He was haunted by the idea that he'd been chosen for something greater. He read religious texts, studied metaphysics, and believed that music was his divine assignment. God gave me this gift, he told Rivers, but I don't know what he wants me to do with it anymore. That spiritual restlessness kept him up at night. He feared he had strayed too far from what he was meant to be. Even his performances began to feel like betrayals. I sing to thousands, he once said, but I don't feel a thing when I do it anymore. He felt like he was mimicking himself, hollow, mechanical, lost in his own echo. There were moments where Rivers thought Elvis might have been suffering from depersonalization. He'd describe feeling like he was watching his life from the outside, like a stranger trapped inside Elvis Presley's body. Fame had made him larger than life, but it had also erased the parts of him that were most human. Rivers said he once looked at me and said, "Doc, I'm Elvis Presley, but I have no idea who that is anymore." Even his deepest personal connections couldn't fill the void. He surrounded himself with people, but rarely felt seen. He gave away cars and jewelry, not out of arrogance, but desperation, a desperate attempt to be loved without having to say the words. Underneath it all, Elvis feared abandonment. He feared that once the applause faded, no one would stay. That fear is what kept him performing long after his body was breaking down. He didn't want to be remembered for the fall. He wanted to be remembered for the fire. But by the end, that fire had turned to smoke. He began hiding things from everyone, even Dr. Rivers, canceling sessions, dodging calls, smiling on stage while crumbling off it. The truth was this: Elvis didn't die because of a single pill or a single night. He died from exhaustion, from heartbreak, from years of pretending to be okay when he wasn't. His death was slow, invisible, and entirely avoidable. Elvis wasn't destroyed by drugs, Rivers said. He was destroyed by the world's refusal to let him be human. And that, perhaps, is the most tragic truth of all. The king of rock and roll gave everything: his voice, his youth, his soul. But in return, the world never gave him permission to simply be Elvis. Dr. Malcolm Rivers never intended to speak publicly. For over 40 years, he honored the silence that therapy demands. He held back the confessions, the cries, the broken pieces that Elvis Presley left scattered across 100 whispered phone calls and late-night sessions. But now, at 90 years old, with no more clients, no more secrets to protect, and the weight of one name still pressing on his chest, he decided to break his silence. Not for fame, not for money, but because, in his words, the world deserves to know who he really was. Rivers sat in a quiet room during the interview, voice shaking, eyes wet, and began recounting what no fan ever saw. "Elvis wasn't a rock star to me," he said. "He was a wounded soul who never got the help he truly needed." The therapist went on to admit he carries guilt. Deep, paralyzing guilt for not doing more, for not breaking through the wall of enablers, for not defying the system that protected the brand but abandoned the man. "There were moments," he said, "where I should have intervened, should have gone public, should have called for help. But I was afraid. I was afraid of losing access to him, afraid they'd shut the door. And they would have, because they didn't want him fixed. They wanted him functional." That quiet truth, that Elvis was kept alive just enough to keep performing, is the darkest revelation of all. Rivers described how, near the end, Elvis wasn't just physically unwell. He was spiritually defeated. "He was done," Rivers whispered. "He just didn't know how to stop being Elvis long enough to be saved." In his final letter to Rivers, found among the therapist's private papers, Elvis wrote, "I hope I did enough. I hope they see me." That line, for Rivers, is everything, because it reveals the one thing Elvis wanted more than applause, more than fame, more than even love, to be understood. In his confession, Dr. Rivers painted a portrait of a man who wasn't a myth, but a mirror, reflecting the impossible expectations we place on the people we idolize. Elvis was never allowed to be weak, never allowed to rest, never allowed to say, "I'm not okay." And by the time the world noticed, it was already too late. He died surrounded by people, Rivers said, but he died alone. And now, after all these years, the man who knew Elvis's truth better than anyone has one final hope: that we stop seeing Elvis Presley as a cautionary tale and start seeing him as a human tragedy. A man with extraordinary gifts and equally extraordinary wounds. A boy from Tupelo who just wanted to sing. A son who never got over losing his mama. A father who felt like a stranger to his own child. A husband who couldn't hold on to love.
He and I spent a lot of time together. I'm upstairs. The upper part of Graceland is basically his room and my room, so...
Graceland, the iconic residence of Elvis Presley, stands as a timeless symbol of rock and roll history, drawing countless visitors each year. More than just a mansion, it's a cultural landmark, a living testament to the life and legacy of the King of Rock. However, there's one part of Graceland that remains a mystery, a hidden upstairs area, sealed off for decades. This space has never been seen by the public, shrouded in secrecy and intrigue. In this video, we'll uncover the enigma of what lies behind those locked doors. Why has this area been kept off limits for so long? What makes it so sacred and untouchable? Stay tuned as we delve into the fascinating mystery that continues to captivate fans and curious minds alike. Nestled in the heart of Memphis, Tennessee, Graceland is not just a house, it's a monument. As you approach, its grand entrance welcomes you into the world of Elvis Presley, a world that continues to captivate millions of visitors every year. The mansion, surrounded by lush greenery and sprawling grounds, offers a glimpse into the life of a rock and roll legend. The iconic white pillars and the grandeur of the building immediately draw you in, giving you a sense of stepping into something extraordinary. Graceland is more than just a home, it's a shrine to Elvis's legacy, carefully preserved and curated for fans from all corners of the globe. Inside, every room tells a story, brimming with history and personality. The famous Jungle Room is one of the most memorable, with its green shag carpeting, Polynesian-style decor, and the vibrant aura that captures the eccentricity of Elvis's style. It's a room that feels frozen in time, a tribute to Elvis's larger-than-life persona. The meditation garden, tucked quietly behind the house, provides a stark contrast, a serene, peaceful space that reflects a more contemplative side of Elvis. It's here, amidst the calm, that Elvis was laid to rest, alongside his family members. The garden feels like a moment of silence in the middle of the energetic whirlwind that is Graceland. As you tour the mansion, you're led through rooms adorned with gold records, each one representing a milestone in Elvis's incredible career. These records aren't just plaques on the wall. They're symbols of a musical revolution, each one marking a moment when Elvis changed the course of music history. The private jets that once carried him across the country are also part of the experience, each one offering a window into his life on the road. But despite the vibrancy and history of the public spaces, there's one part of Graceland that remains untouched by time and the curious eyes of visitors: the upstairs. While the rooms downstairs are filled with life, stories, and memorabilia, the second floor remains a place of silence. It's a stark contrast, a space that stands apart from the rest of the house. The vibrant decor of the Jungle Room, the sacred stillness of the meditation garden, and the gold records all shine in their own way. Yet the upstairs holds something else, an untold story, hidden from view, its silence echoing louder than any of the other rooms. The upstairs at Graceland, where Elvis's true retreat lay, remains off-limits. It was the one place where Elvis could escape the chaos of fame, a private space away from the constant glare of cameras and fans. While visitors marvel at the opulence downstairs, the upstairs rooms hold a deeper mystery, a contrast between the vibrant life celebrated in the public areas and the untouched, sealed-off world above. The difference is palpable, a house that tells a story of fame, but with one chapter forever locked away from the world. On August 16, 1977, the world lost one of its greatest icons. Elvis Presley, at just 42 years old, was found unresponsive on the bathroom floor of Graceland. An all-too-sudden end to the life of the king of rock and roll. The circumstances surrounding his death, officially attributed to a heart attack, raised many questions. Fans, the media, and the public were left in shock, desperate for answers about the man who had changed the course of music history. The final hours of Elvis's life were filled with mystery, fueling speculation about the toll of fame, his emotional struggles, and his well-documented reliance on prescription medication. As the world sought to understand how the king could fall so suddenly, the Presley family made a bold decision, a decision that would only add to the enigma surrounding Elvis's legacy. In the wake of his passing, Elvis's upstairs sanctuary, which had been his refuge from the overwhelming pressures of fame, was locked. From that moment on, the second floor of Graceland remained untouched, its doors sealed tight, never to be opened to the public. Unlike other parts of the mansion, where visitors could freely wander and admire the exhibits, this space was kept strictly off-limits. No one, not even the most high-profile guests, was allowed access. The upstairs wasn't just a room or a series of spaces. It was an intimate part of Elvis's life, where he could escape from the chaos and just be himself. It was his private world, untouched by the constant demands of stardom. Why was the upstairs locked away so swiftly after Elvis's death? The answer lies in the desire to preserve something deeply personal, something that, to the Presley family, was sacred. The upstairs was more than just a collection of rooms. It was where Elvis lived privately, away from the public eye. It was where he found solace, comfort, and peace. It was, in many ways, his true home, the one space in Graceland where he could shed the weight of his fame and live authentically. The Presleys knew that by keeping the upstairs sealed, they were protecting more than just physical belongings. They were protecting the sanctity of Elvis's private life. The rooms upstairs were left exactly as they had been the day Elvis passed. His belongings remained undisturbed. His clothes still hung in the closet, his records sat beside the bed, and his favorite chair remained positioned across from the television. It was as if time had stopped in that space, as if the upstairs had been frozen in time the moment Elvis's life came to an end. This was no ordinary preservation. It was an act of reverence. The family chose to keep this part of Graceland untouched, not to satisfy public curiosity, but to honor Elvis's memory and respect his privacy. The upstairs was where Elvis could retreat, where he could shut the door to the world and find peace. It wasn't just a place to sleep or relax. It was his sanctuary. Away from the bright lights and the constant noise of fame, the upstairs offered Elvis the solitude he needed. It was in this space that Elvis could escape the expectations placed upon him and rediscover the man behind the superstar. The rooms weren't just functional. They were a reflection of his personality and his desires. The bookshelves, filled with spiritual and philosophical texts, revealed his quest for meaning and understanding. The carefully chosen furniture and decor demonstrated his love for comfort and peace. And the view from his window, overlooking the grounds of Graceland, gave him a sense of calm, a moment of respite from the world below. When Elvis passed, the upstairs became more than just a place where he had lived. It became a symbol of everything he had sought to protect: his privacy, his peace, and his truth. By sealing off this space, the Presley family ensured that the upstairs remained a tribute to the man who had created it. No one would enter that realm without permission, ensuring that the world could never strip away the last piece of Elvis Presley that was truly his. In the end, the upstairs of Graceland was not just a physical space. It was a profound testament to the complexity of a man who was both a global superstar and an intensely private individual. On that fateful morning of August 16, 1977, the world was forever changed. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was found lifeless on the bathroom floor of his beloved Graceland. At just 42 years old, his death sent shockwaves through his millions of fans, the music industry, and the world at large. Officially, the cause of death was attributed to a heart attack, but the unanswered questions quickly piled up. How could such a vibrant, world-changing figure be taken so suddenly? What had led to his untimely demise? The media, desperate for answers, flooded the news with speculation, rumors, and wild theories, attempting to piece together the final hours of the man who had revolutionized music. Amid this chaos, the Presley family faced their own grief and heartbreak. But they also made a decision that would speak volumes about their respect for Elvis and his legacy. Rather than turning Graceland's upstairs, the very space where Elvis's last moments were spent, into a tourist attraction or part of a public spectacle, they chose to preserve it in its entirety, untouched and sealed. The upstairs, where Elvis had retreated for his personal moments of solitude, was off-limits, a decision that struck many as strange in a world obsessed with fame, exposure, and the constant demand for more. While the rest of Graceland would be opened up to the world, this intimate space was kept sacred, locked away in reverence for the man who had called it home. The family's choice to keep the upstairs private was rooted in a deep sense of respect. To them, this wasn't just a room or a floor in a house. It was the very heart of Elvis's personal life, a place that had been his refuge from the prying eyes of the public. By sealing it off, they were not only protecting his memory, but also shielding his spirit from the commercialization that had followed him throughout his life. They understood that Elvis had lived much of his life under a microscope, a world where every detail was scrutinized, every moment turned into entertainment. The last thing they wanted was for his final, private sanctuary to become another exhibit in the never-ending parade of his public persona. Graceland was already a treasure trove of Elvis's achievements and memorabilia. Visitors could wander through the mansion's many rooms, admire his gold records, sit in his famous jungle room, and even board his private jets. The public was welcome to explore these parts of Elvis's life, but the upstairs remained off-limits as a space set apart from the spectacle. It was a place where Elvis had lived as a person, not a performer. The family saw it as a way to preserve the dignity of the man behind the legend, protecting the most intimate parts of his existence from becoming just another page in the story of Elvis Presley. It was an act of love and remembrance, a gesture that honored the man as much as the music. In contrast, the world outside Graceland was eager to turn every moment of Elvis's life into a form of entertainment. Fans and the media alike were consumed with the desire to know more, to piece together the final chapter of Elvis's story. The public wanted every detail, every possible answer, and many were quick to turn his death into a tabloid sensation. Yet the Presley family, in the face of this overwhelming demand, chose to remain resolute. They understood that some things are meant to be kept sacred. Elvis's upstairs was a part of his personal world, a sanctuary that had offered him peace in a life filled with chaos. By locking it away, they were ensuring that this one last space, this one last refuge, would remain untouched by the insatiable hunger for celebrity details. This choice stands in stark contrast to the public's endless quest for exposure. In a world where every celebrity moment is dissected, filmed, and sold for profit, the Presley family's decision to keep the upstairs locked away serves as a rare reminder of the power of privacy. It's an act that highlights the importance of maintaining boundaries in an increasingly invasive world, where every personal detail is commodified. The family's choice not only protected Elvis's final refuge, but also reminded us that some parts of a person's life are simply too important to be consumed by the public eye. The second-floor staircase at Graceland stands as a symbol of one of the most closely guarded boundaries in celebrity history. It's not just a set of stairs leading to another part of the house. It's a physical and emotional barrier, a line that no one was allowed to cross, not even the most prestigious guests. This staircase, hidden in plain sight, represents more than just a threshold. It is a boundary that Elvis Presley, even at the height of his fame, fiercely protected. The upstairs of Graceland was his refuge, a private sanctuary where he could escape the demands of the world around him. The rule was clear. No one, not even the closest friends, family members, or high-profile visitors, was allowed to venture beyond the stairs. The most striking example of this rule in action was former President Bill Clinton's visit to Graceland. In 1989, Clinton, a lifelong Elvis fan, was welcomed to the mansion by the Presley family, but even he was politely turned away at the staircase. Despite being one of the most powerful men in the world, Clinton was unable to access the upstairs, and the door to that part of Elvis's private world remained firmly closed. For many, this act of exclusion seemed strange, even absurd. How could someone as famous as Elvis have a part of his life that even a sitting president could not see? But this was the essence of Elvis's philosophy when it came to his personal space. There was a part of his world that belonged only to him, a space that no amount of fame, influence, or status could penetrate. This concept of privacy in the world of celebrities is rare, especially in a culture where fame is often equated with exposure. Celebrities today are expected to share every aspect of their lives with the world, from social media posts to reality TV shows. But Elvis was different. He understood the value of privacy, and more importantly, he knew that some aspects of his life had to remain untouched. The upstairs at Graceland was his most sacred space, and he chose to keep it private, even from his most trusted confidants. In a life filled with public appearances, constant media attention, and the never-ending spotlight, Elvis's upstairs was the one place where he could simply be himself, away from the cameras and the noise. It was his last remaining sanctuary, and he took great care to protect it. The level of protection surrounding the upstairs was akin to that of a museum vault, where priceless artifacts are stored out of reach, preserved in their original state. This wasn't a matter of hiding something shameful or secretive. It was about preserving a part of Elvis's life that was too valuable to be exposed to the public. The family didn't want to exploit this space for commercial gain or curiosity. They wanted to keep it intact, untouched, and preserved for the memory of Elvis, not for entertainment or profit. The rooms upstairs, untouched since his death, are almost like a time capsule, frozen in time the moment Elvis took his last breath. Nothing has been moved. Nothing has been rearranged. It's as if the space itself is still holding on to the last vestiges of the man who lived there. This extraordinary level of privacy, the decision to keep that part of Graceland off limits, serves as a testament to Elvis's desire to control his personal space. It reflects his belief that some things are too sacred to be made public, too personal to be shared with the world. In an era where every detail of a celebrity's life is consumed by the public, Elvis's insistence on keeping the upstairs private sets him apart as someone who valued his individuality and solitude above all else. The staircase, as unassuming as it may seem, is the ultimate symbol of this philosophy, a boundary that could not be crossed, no matter who you were. Over the years, a select few have been granted access to Graceland's most mysterious and forbidden space, the upstairs. But what they saw, or more importantly, what they didn't share, has only fueled the ongoing intrigue surrounding this secret part of Elvis Presley's world. One of the most famous figures to experience this exclusive access was actor Nicolas Cage, a lifelong Elvis fan who, at the height of his fame, was married to Lisa Marie Presley. Cage, granted a rare glimpse into the upstairs, described the experience as surreal, haunting, and deeply emotional. However, despite his intimate connection to the Presley family, Cage has remained tight-lipped about the details of what he saw behind those closed doors. In interviews, memoirs, and public appearances, he's refused to share what the upstairs looked like, further intensifying the mystery. Why, when given the chance to reveal this hidden part of Elvis's life, did Cage choose silence? His refusal to speak only deepens the question. Is there something so profound, so personal, that even Cage couldn't bring himself to describe it. But Cage isn't the only one to have witnessed the forbidden upstairs. There's a strange and eerie story involving Chewy Thompson, a social media influencer with no formal ties to the Presley family or the Graceland estate. Thompson's tale is unlike any other, as it involves an unexpected invitation to the upstairs during what was supposed to be a regular tour of Graceland. According to Thompson, while on the tour, he was approached by a man dressed as staff, who led him away from the group, through the mansion, and up the staircase that has remained sealed for decades. Thompson, flanked by 2 guards, was ushered upstairs into the very rooms that the public has never been allowed to see. However, what he encountered inside those rooms remains a mystery, because Thompson refuses to speak about it. Not a single word, not online, not in interviews, and not even when pressed for details. His silence has only made his story more puzzling, and speculation about what he saw has spread like wildfire. Could Thompson's experience have been a mistake, a random error by the staff? Or was he handpicked for some other, more mysterious reason? What exactly is so compelling about the upstairs that some people, like Thompson and Cage, are granted access while the rest of the world is kept at bay? The secrecy surrounding their experiences, particularly Thompson's decision to remain silent, raises a number of unsettling questions. It's one thing to be invited into a private space, but it's another to be asked to keep it a secret. What could be inside that would compel someone to remain tight-lipped, even when faced with the overwhelming curiosity of the public? And why has no one ever publicly described what lies behind that sealed door? Beyond these strange encounters, there have also been persistent rumors that have further fueled the speculation. Over the years, whispers have circulated about Elvis's private life, particularly regarding the possibility of secret children. Various women have come forward with claims that they had secret relationships with Elvis, and, in some cases, even alleged they were his children. Some of these claims have been dismissed outright, while others have vanished without explanation, leaving room for even more questions. The most startling of these rumors suggests that there may be undiscovered family members hidden away from the public eye for reasons that no one can fully understand. Could there be a deeper connection between these rumors and the secrecy surrounding the upstairs? What if the Presley family has kept certain truths hidden? Truths that could shatter the image of Elvis as we know him. These rumors and the strange stories of those who have been inside Graceland's forbidden upstairs only add to the enigma. Is there a hidden history in those rooms that the public is not meant to know? What could Elvis have wanted to keep so closely guarded, even from his own family, his closest friends, and the world? The answers, it seems, lie somewhere between speculation and secrecy. As the stories of Nicolas Cage, Chewy Thompson, and the persistent rumors swirl, the upstairs of Graceland remains a locked vault, its contents known only to a few, and those who've glimpsed its mystery are reluctant to reveal its truths. Perhaps, as with so many elements of Elvis's life, some mysteries are simply meant to remain unsolved. As the mystery of Graceland's upstairs continues to captivate the imagination of fans and historians alike, a growing number of theories have emerged about what might lie behind those sealed doors. For decades, speculation has swirled around the rooms that remain locked away from the public, each theory more intriguing and bizarre than the last. Some believe the upstairs contains more than just Elvis's personal belongings and memorabilia. Could it be hiding deeper, more unsettling truths about Elvis's life, his death, or even parts of his family history that have been kept in the shadows? These theories range from the plausible to the fantastical, But they all share one thing in common: a deep curiosity about the unknown. One of the most compelling theories is that the upstairs could hold clues to the mysteries surrounding Elvis's death. Despite the official cause being a heart attack, many have questioned whether there was more at play. Theories about Elvis's health problems, his reliance on prescription medications, and the pressures of his fame have fueled speculation for years. Could the upstairs hold evidence, medical records, personal writings, or items from that fateful day that might shed light on what truly happened in the hours leading up to his death? Perhaps there are personal items in those rooms that hint at the emotional and physical toll Elvis was enduring in his final years. These possibilities have led some to believe that the upstairs is more than just a place frozen in time. It could be a vault holding the last untold story of the king of rock and roll. Another theory suggests that the upstairs could contain hidden aspects of Elvis's family history. There have been persistent rumors of secret children, long-buried family secrets, and relationships that were never made public. Could there be documents or photographs stored upstairs that reveal a side of Elvis's personal life that has never been known to the public? What if the upstairs holds the answers to some of the most enduring mysteries about his relationships, his parentage, or even his ties to certain people in his life who were never fully disclosed? The idea that Elvis's family history could be more complex than previously understood adds a layer of intrigue to the already mysterious upstairs. But there's more to the story than just the speculation about what might be hidden behind those doors. Over the years, there have been numerous reports from visitors and staff about strange and unexplained occurrences emanating from the upstairs. Some have claimed to hear footsteps, muffled voices, and even the sound of laughter coming from the second floor, even when no one was supposed to be there. These sounds, described as haunting and otherworldly, have been enough to fuel even more wild speculation about the space. Could these noises be remnants of Elvis's spirit, lingering in the rooms where he spent so much of his life? Or are they the result of something more tangible? Perhaps a sign that the upstairs is hiding more than just physical objects? The fact that these strange sounds seem to occur with such regularity has led some to wonder whether the upstairs is, in some way, alive with energy, whether that energy is tied to Elvis himself or to something even more mysterious. These unexplained sounds have only added fuel to the fire of speculation about what lies behind the locked doors of Graceland's upstairs. Could it be that the space holds secrets far beyond what anyone could have imagined? Secrets about Elvis's personal life, his untimely death, or even the mysteries of the Presley family that no one has dared to confront. The stories of these eerie sounds have sparked a wave of theories, each more fantastic than the last, and they continue to stir the imagination of fans who are desperate for answers. As we explore these theories, it's important to remember that the upstairs at Graceland remains one of the most closely guarded secrets in the world of rock and roll. No one has been able to penetrate that final frontier, and it's clear that the Presley family intends to keep it that way. The upstairs is not just a part of Graceland. It's a symbol of the mysteries that still surround Elvis's life and legacy. Whether it contains the answers to long-held questions about his death, his family, or his personal struggles, the truth remains locked away, perhaps forever. But as long as those doors remain sealed, the theories will continue to grow, and the allure of the upstairs will never fade. The upstairs at Graceland was more than just a set of rooms. It was Elvis Presley's personal retreat, a sanctuary where he could escape the intense pressures of fame. In a life that was constantly in the spotlight, where every move was scrutinized and every detail of his existence was public property, the upstairs offered Elvis a rare sense of privacy. This space was where he could be himself, away from the flashing cameras and the constant buzz of his celebrity. It was the one place in Graceland that truly belonged to him, a private world where he could find peace amidst the chaos that surrounded him. The upstairs was where Elvis could shed the persona of the king of rock and roll and simply be Elvis, unseen, unnoticed, and, most importantly, free. The room that served as his refuge was meticulously designed for comfort and solitude. His bed, a custom piece, was positioned for ultimate relaxation. Elvis was known for his late nights, often staying up until the early hours, reading or reflecting. The bed, surrounded by shelves of books, offered him a place to retreat into his thoughts. Among the books were texts on philosophy, religion, and the mysteries of life, subjects that deeply interested Elvis in his later years. His love for spirituality was well documented, and the books in his room reflected his search for deeper meaning. These weren't just casual reads. They were texts that spoke to his desire for understanding and connection with something greater than himself. The room also contained personal items that gave a glimpse into the man behind the legend. His favorite records, carefully chosen, lay within reach. The atmosphere in the room was one of quiet contemplation. There was a sense of calm that enveloped the space, a stark contrast to the public image of Elvis as a larger-than-life entertainer. Here, in his private sanctuary, Elvis had the space to simply be. The decor was reflective of his unique tastes, combining comfort and style in a way that only he could. The atmosphere was one of peace, the exact opposite of the vibrant, high-energy spaces downstairs that showcased his public achievements and persona. This upstairs space was the only part of Elvis's world that wasn't subject to the demands of the outside world. Visitors, fans, and even his closest friends were kept away from this area, ensuring that it remained untouched by the glare of public attention. It was a space that Elvis guarded fiercely.
Graceland, the estate of legendary singer Elvis Presley, is facing a legal battle now over a potential foreclosure sale.
For nearly half a century, one part of Graceland remained untouched, a shed tucked away behind the estate, sealed and forgotten like a ghost locked in time. Until now. In 2025, that shed was finally opened. And what they found inside has left fans and historians speechless. Tattered boxes, dust-covered belongings, and, according to early reports, something that may upend everything we thought we knew about Elvis Presley. But that's not all. Whispers have begun swirling that Colonel Tom Parker himself may have had a reason to keep it shut for all these years. Why now? Why after 48 years? And what could have been so dangerous about the contents of a shed that even the Presley family refused to open it? This isn't just about memorabilia. This might be about the final secret of the king, the one they didn't want you to know. The story begins now, and it starts with a padlock, a missing key, and a truth long buried in the heart of Memphis. The shed sat behind Graceland, weathered by time and nearly overtaken by kudzu vines, barely noticeable to the thousands of visitors who passed through the estate each year. It wasn't featured on any tour. Guides didn't speak of it, and over time, even long-time employees stopped asking about it. Some assumed it was just storage. Others whispered that Vernon Presley had it locked after Elvis's death for a reason. But no one could have guessed what was really inside. In early 2025, after Graceland narrowly avoided being sold during a suspicious attempted auction, Presley estate archivists began a full property audit. That's when they rediscovered the shed, its door rusted shut, its lock fused by time. What followed was more like an archaeological dig than simple cleanup. When the door finally creaked open, a blast of musty air poured out, along with the sharp scent of old wood and motor oil. The first thing they saw was a dusty motorcycle cover, a tattered army duffel bag, and a wooden crate labeled simply, "Do not open." Inside that crate was a collection of items that didn't just belong to Elvis. They told a story no one was supposed to hear. Unmarked pill bottles, handwritten notes, and a leather-bound journal with pages torn out. There was also a broken tape recorder and several reels of tape, labeled with dates just months before Elvis's death. One reel, marked July 3, 1977, Confession, was removed and taken straight to an audio lab. What they heard stunned them. The voice on the tape was unmistakably Elvis. He sounded frail, tired, but determined. In the recording, he talked about being watched, about pressure from the Colonel, and about a secret he had been forced to bury. He didn't say what the secret was, but he hinted that it would die with him. Archivists realized immediately this wasn't just memorabilia. This was a man's final desperate attempt to speak the truth. And for nearly 5 decades, it sat just steps from where he once lived, locked away in silence. But the biggest questions still remain. What was he so afraid of? And why did the Colonel want this hidden? The tapes were just the beginning. As archivists dug deeper into the contents of the shed, they uncovered what looked like a private storage archive, a space Elvis himself may have curated, hidden from even his closest family members. There were stacks of unopened fan letters bundled in string, personal drawings and doodles of dreams he never spoke about publicly, and strangely, multiple newspaper clippings about other celebrities who had died young. James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, Hank Williams, all marked in red ink. At first, it seemed like a coincidence, but then they found a separate folder labeled Next. Inside were scribbled notes in Elvis's handwriting that referenced impossible pressures, no way out, and cryptic mentions of the Colonel's plan. There was even a letter never mailed, addressed to Priscilla, where he wrote, "I don't think I'll make it to August. They won't let me walk away." This was a side of Elvis Presley the world had never seen. Paranoid, maybe, but possibly right. Especially when you look at who they might have been. Colonel Tom Parker, born Andreas Van Kuck, was no ordinary manager. A mysterious figure with no passport, a gambling addiction, and rumored ties to organized crime, Parker kept an iron grip on Elvis's life, controlling not only his career but his finances, relationships, and even his access to medical care. It's widely known Parker took 50% of Elvis's earnings, an unheard-of arrangement. But what's less known is how far he allegedly went to maintain control. Several contracts were uncovered inside the shed, including one Elvis had written the word "trap" across in thick black marker. One clause stood out, a restriction on overseas touring. For decades, fans thought Parker refused to let Elvis tour internationally out of greed. But a memo buried in the box offered a darker truth. Parker feared Elvis would defect, run away and never return. Now, with the confession tape and these disturbing documents, a clearer picture emerges. Elvis wasn't just overwhelmed by fame or struggling with health. He may have been a prisoner inside his own kingdom, watched, manipulated, and medicated into silence. And the shed? It was his secret vault, a desperate archive meant to one day speak for him when he no longer could. But what exactly was he preparing the world to discover? And why now, nearly 50 years later, is it all coming out? Beneath the boxes of contracts and recordings, tucked into a weathered briefcase wrapped in a Sun Records towel, archivists found something that brought the entire room to a halt. An original notebook, spine cracked, pages yellowed with age. On the inside cover, in Elvis's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "If I don't make it, tell the truth." What followed were dozens of pages written in a frantic scrawl, documenting everything from his earliest anxieties in Hollywood to his mounting health crises in the 1970s. But the most chilling entries were about his relationship with the people closest to him, and how he believed they were turning on him. One entry read, "Can't trust Vernon. He says it's for my good, but he's scared of the Colonel too. They all are." Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, had long been portrayed as a loyal figure. But in these pages, Elvis described moments where Vernon reportedly sided with Colonel Parker, allowed strange men to administer medications without proper oversight, and urged Elvis to keep performing despite obvious signs his body was breaking down. Elvis even began questioning his own doctors, particularly Dr. George Nick Nicopolis. "Dr. Nick says I'm fine. I ain't fine. Can't breathe at night. Can't see straight. I take what he gives me, then I'm supposed to sing for 15,000 screaming people. This ain't living." It was raw, painful, and revealed a man who no longer trusted his team, but had no one else to turn to. Even more disturbing were entries that hinted at surveillance within Graceland itself. "Saw wires behind the mirror. They say I'm crazy. I know what I saw." While no hard evidence of such surveillance was ever found, the paranoia that seeped through these pages was impossible to ignore. And given the iron grip Colonel Parker held over every aspect of Elvis's life, it didn't seem impossible. In fact, it seemed probable. But why would Elvis keep this notebook, along with other private documents, in a shed outside of Graceland, rather than inside the house itself? Because, perhaps, he knew the mansion wasn't safe, that someone inside might one day try to destroy the truth. And the shed was his only sanctuary. These weren't the ramblings of a delusional man. They were the desperate writings of someone who knew his time was running out and feared the world would never hear his real story. Now, nearly 5 decades later, that story was finally being told, page by page, out loud for the very first time. The most haunting discovery came not from a notebook or a tape, but from an old metal lunchbox hidden behind a stack of forgotten tour posters. Inside it was a bundle of Super 8 film reels, each carefully labeled in Elvis's own hand. Memphis, 1968, Vegas, backstage, Lisa's birthday, and then one reel marked only with a single word: proof. It took days to find a working projector. And when they finally threaded the film through the reel and turned out the lights, what flickered on the wall was more than anyone expected. This wasn't just home footage or fan-shot concerts. This was surveillance. Grainy, shadowed, clearly filmed through vents or behind mirrors. The angle was wrong. The audio was clipped, but it was unmistakable. Someone had been secretly recording Elvis inside his own home. One reel showed him passed out at a piano, barely breathing, as a man off-screen whispered, "He'll bounce back. Get him ready for sound check." Another clip showed him being helped down a hallway, his legs giving out, as someone, possibly Vernon, repeated, "He just needs rest. Don't call anyone." These weren't the actions of people trying to save him. They were the actions of handlers, pushing a collapsing man toward another sold-out show. But the reel marked proof. That's what changed everything. It showed Elvis, thin and sweaty, speaking directly into the lens. The timestamp read April 1977, months before his death. He looked terrified. "If you're watching this," he said, "they got what they wanted. But don't believe what they tell you. I didn't fall apart. I was pushed. I was used. I gave them everything. And when I couldn't give any more, they started planning how to move on without me." He ended the video with a plea. "Don't let them turn me into a cartoon. I was a man. I hurt. I loved. I tried." The screen cut to black. It was the final testimony of a legend stripped bare. No rhinestones, no screaming fans, just a human being who had become a product, used, medicated, and discarded. That film reel shouldn't have existed. But it did. And it was hidden in a shed outside Graceland for nearly 50 years. And now, the world would have to reckon with it. The question on everyone's mind was simple, yet earth-shattering. Who recorded that footage? And even more chilling, who was it meant for? As archivists and investigators examined the films more closely, they noticed something unsettling. The reels were cataloged not in Elvis's handwriting, but in a neat, anonymous script. Some reels had timestamps that aligned with known concert dates or studio sessions. Others didn't match any schedule, as if someone had been documenting Elvis's off days, his quiet moments, his pain, his decline. Rumors swirled that it could have been a member of the Memphis Mafia, the tight-knit group of friends and staff who surrounded Elvis 24/7. But former members either denied knowledge or flat-out refused to comment. One, speaking anonymously through a reporter, said, "There were cameras in the walls, man. Not for security, for control." Sharon, a longtime housekeeper at Graceland, confirmed that no one was allowed in the attic, ever. Not even Vernon after Elvis died. She remembered once asking what was up there and being told sternly by a staffer, "Don't ask about the shed, just clean the kitchen." The shed, it turns out, was just a cover. What looked like an old tool shed was actually a reinforced outbuilding Elvis used for storage and, reportedly, privacy. But after his death, it was padlocked and left to rot in the Memphis heat. Inside that structure, beyond the film reels, were other items that raised even more disturbing questions. Taped phone calls, contracts for canceled appearances, prescriptions written under false names, and, most notably, a stack of legal paperwork stamped unfiled. Among them was a handwritten letter addressed to Lisa, scrawled in shaky ink, which read, "They will never let me walk away. If something happens to me, please know I tried to fix it. I love you, baby." That note, alone, was enough to reopen wounds fans thought had scarred over. For decades, Elvis's decline had been chalked up to addiction, burnout, and personal demons. But now, it appeared, there had been a larger force at play, an invisible pressure crushing the man behind the music. A machine built not just to promote the king, but to own him. And now that the locks were off, the truth was leaking out. The truth, as it unraveled, wasn't just sad, it was terrifying. The deeper experts dug into the items pulled from the attic and the shed, the more they began to realize that Elvis Presley wasn't just a superstar losing control of his fame, he may have been trapped by it. Tucked into a dusty file cabinet was a faded contract stamped confidential, listing perpetual management agreements tied to unnamed entities. Lawyers reviewing the document called it a career prison. In plain terms, Elvis had signed away his future. He couldn't retire, couldn't escape his commitments, even if it meant compromising his health. And the worst part? The signatures appeared forged in some places, Even more unsettling was what they found in a second locked compartment: medical reports. Dozens of them. Not the public-facing records the media had seen over the years, but private documents suggesting Elvis's health was in much worse condition than anyone had ever disclosed. Evidence pointed to autoimmune disorders, intestinal blockages, and spinal deterioration. There were X-rays, doctor's notes, and charts showing him rapidly declining in his final 2 years. But here's where it got even darker. An anonymous note was discovered paperclipped to one of the files. Written on yellowed, typewritten paper, it said, "We can't stop the tour. No matter what happens to him, he's more profitable on stage than off." No signature, no return address, just that chilling line. And suddenly, the decisions that had haunted fans for decades, why he kept performing, why no one stepped in, why his death felt like it could have been avoided, began to make a grim kind of sense. They found documentation suggesting Elvis had tried to cancel shows. They found angry telegrams from promoters. They found records of Dr. Nick ordering enormous quantities of sedatives and stimulants, sometimes on the same day. It painted a portrait of a man both worshipped and controlled, praised for his strength while being quietly destroyed from within. Elvis wasn't just a victim of fame. He was a prisoner of an industry that saw his body, his image, and even his death as profitable assets. And now, with the attic unlocked and the evidence in plain sight, the public had to confront a question too uncomfortable for most. Did Elvis Presley truly die of natural causes, or was he slowly killed by the very machine that made him a legend? As investigators and archivists continued to sift through the attic's chilling inventory, one last box sat alone, wedged behind a stack of old amplifiers, wrapped tightly in twine, and marked with just 3 words: "Private for Lisa." No one knows for sure who wrote it, but the handwriting matched that of Elvis himself. Carefully untied and opened, the box revealed something even more intimate than forgotten recordings or medical records. It contained Elvis's final unsent letters. Not to fans, not to his father, but to his daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. There were 7 in total, each folded delicately into envelopes without stamps. Some were brief, written in shaky cursive, as if his hand trembled while writing. Others were pages long, spilling with regret, confusion, love, and desperation. In one, Elvis wrote, "If you're reading this, I guess I didn't get better. I want you to know something real. They took more from me than I ever gave. I smiled for cameras, but cried when the doors closed. I was tired, baby. I was so tired." Another included lyrics Lisa had never seen before. Elvis had rewritten "Love Me Tender," but this time it read like a goodbye lullaby. And in the final letter, dated just a week before his death, he included a sentence that left everyone who read it in silence. "They think I don't know what they're doing, but I see it now. If I disappear, it wasn't because I wanted to." The implications were enormous. Was Elvis hinting at foul play, a manipulation by those closest to him? Or was it the paranoid exhaustion of a man stretched too thin? No one could say for sure, but one thing was certain: Elvis never got to send those letters. He left them sealed, hidden in a box, tucked away in an attic no one dared to open. For Lisa Marie, who passed away in early 2023, these letters might have remained a secret forever. But now, the world knew. These weren't letters from a king. They were from a father desperate to be understood, to be remembered not as a myth, but as a man. And as news of the discovery spread, Graceland once again became a pilgrimage, not just to celebrate Elvis's music, but to mourn the parts of him we never got to see. The broken, bruised, and brilliant man whose truth had been buried not 6 feet underground, but just a few steps above his bedroom, locked away in the attic for nearly 50 years. The attic was finally closed again, but something had changed. What once was sealed in silence had now been laid bare for the world to see. The legend of Elvis Presley, the glittering suits, the sold-out shows, the screaming fans, had always been larger than life. But what the attic revealed was something deeper. The loneliness that crept in after the curtain fell, the battles fought in secret, and the man who desperately tried to hold on to himself beneath the crushing weight of fame. And now fans around the world weren't just asking who Elvis was, but what we all missed while staring at the spotlight. Graceland has always been a place of worship for music lovers, a rock and roll temple draped in gold records and memorabilia. But after this attic discovery, it's transformed into something even more sacred. A place of unfinished stories. A place where a handwritten letter can shake your soul more than a platinum album. A place where a stuffed bear from Tupelo means more than a jumpsuit worn in Vegas. A place where, for the first time in decades, Elvis feels real. Visitors who walk the halls of Graceland now aren't just snapping pictures. They're standing in silence, imagining the boy who wrote songs in pain, who tried to shield his daughter from the circus outside, who wondered aloud in scribbled ink if his end was truly his own choice. Even the Presley family has remained largely quiet about the attic contents. A source close to the estate confirmed that some materials won't be made public, not because of scandal, but because they belong to Elvis and Elvis alone. The man who once couldn't go anywhere without cameras flashing is at last being given pieces of his privacy back, even in death. And yet, the story doesn't feel finished. Fans still whisper, was he really planning to disappear? Was someone covering it up? Was that note to Lisa a cry for help or a warning? The attic answered some questions, but like all great legends, it left us with even more. What's certain is this: Elvis didn't just leave behind music. He left behind mysteries, memories, and moments frozen in time. In the end, he wasn't just the king. He was a son, a father, a fragile human being who, for all his fame, still longed to be understood. And maybe now, 48 years later, we're finally beginning to understand him.